Moira Fenn read the advertisement twice, standing in the post office in Drumheller, Alberta, coat still damp from the sleet outside, hands steadier than she had any right to expect. Rancher seeks capable woman. Must be practical, self-sufficient, willing to work hard land, no romance expected.
Privacy respected. If that suits you, write back.
No name. Just a box number in Pincher Creek, 300 kilometers south. She folded the paper and put it in her coat pocket. She had $42 to her name, a bruise on her collarbone that was finally going yellow at the edges, and a brother-in-law who would come looking once he figured out she wasn't at her sister's place anymore.
She wrote back that afternoon. The reply came in 10 days. Come if you're serious. Stage arrives Fridays. I'll be the one waiting. She was serious.
The bus into Pincher Creek smelled like diesel and someone's lunch. Moira sat with her bag on her lap and watched the foothills open up into something enormous and gray-green and indifferent. She'd grown up in Red Deer. She understood prairie. But this was different. The land here had teeth. The man waiting outside the general store was taller than she'd pictured, which was strange because she hadn't pictured him at all. Owen Farrell. That was what the return letter had said, finally, in the second paragraph. She'd almost missed it. He held his hat in both hands the way men do when they're not sure what to do with themselves, turning it slowly at the brim. She walked toward him and said his name as a question. He said hers back. Not as a question, just confirmation. They shook hands. His was rough in a way that meant he actually used them. How far's the drive? She asked.
40 minutes. Maybe more if the road's wet. Is it wet?
He looked at the sky. Probably. They didn't say much else until they were out of town. The truck was old enough that the heat took a while to kick in, and Moira kept her hands under her thighs and watched the fence posts blur past.
You said in your letter you managed accounts, Owen said, for my husband's business before.
He didn't ask about the before.
She'd written widowed in her letter, and he'd accepted it the way people accept weather, as a fact that has already happened and doesn't need discussion. I've been letting the books go, he said. 3 years of guessing and hoping. That's a way to lose a ranch, I know.
She almost smiled. Not many men would say that out loud. The property came into view around a long bend. A 2-story farmhouse, white once, now the color of old cream, barn in better shape than the house, which told her something about the man. A line of cottonwoods along the eastern edge rattled in the wind. It's not much to look at, Owen said. It's fine.
You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to be polite.
I'm saying it because I've been looking at worse for the last 2 years and calling it home. He parked the truck and got out without answering that. She didn't need him to. Inside, the kitchen was clean in the way of a man who cleans before company arrives, but not often otherwise. Surfaces wiped, dishes done, a faint smell of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. There was a bedroom downstairs she was shown without ceremony.
Single bed, blue quilt, window facing north toward the foothills. There's a lock on the door, Owen said. I put it on last week.
Moira looked at him. Figured you'd want to know that, he said, and walked back to the kitchen. She stood in the doorway of that room for a long moment. Then she set her bag down and went to find out about the books. They were as bad as he'd said. 3 years of receipts shoved into a biscuit tin, invoices written on the backs of feed bags, a ledger that started in one handwriting and stopped abruptly 18 months ago in the middle of an entry. His wife had kept the books, she understood. He hadn't said so directly, but the handwriting was careful and rounded, clearly not his. And when Moira reached that last unfinished line, she closed the ledger and didn't mention it.
She spent the first 3 days sorting. Owen stayed out of her way, and she stayed out of his, and it worked the way those things work when both people understand the value of space. She cooked dinner because she said she would, and he did the dishes without being asked, which she hadn't expected. On the 4th morning, she found it. Your fuel supplier, she said at breakfast, setting a stack of invoices beside his plate. Going back 14 months. You're being charged the bulk rate, but getting the small load delivery. That's about 12 cents a liter difference on every fill.
Owen looked at the invoices, then at her.
How much? He asked.
I've only gone back 14 months and I'm already at $900.
He was quiet for a moment. Ray Dunmore's been handling that account since I took over from my father.
Then Ray Dunmore has been stealing from your father too, probably. He sat back in his chair. I went to school with Ray. I know that doesn't make it easier. He picked up the top invoice and looked at it. Then he set it down. All right, he said. We go talk to him. She hadn't expected the we. Ray Dunmore ran his fuel supply business out of a converted garage on the edge of town, and he was the kind of man whose handshake had too much pressure in it, the handshake of someone who needs you to feel his confidence before he's earned it. He smiled when Owen came in, nodded at Moira without quite looking at her, said something about it being good to see Owen out and about. Moira put the invoices on the counter between them.
These are yours, she said. Ray's smile didn't move. Come again. 14 months of deliveries billed at bulk rate. We'd like the difference refunded, plus the months we haven't gone through yet. I'll be fair about the calculation. Now hold on. Ray looked at Owen. Owen, what's this about? Math, Moira said before Owen could answer. That's all.
I can show you line by line if you want, or you can take my word that I've checked it twice. Ray's face had gone the particular shade of red that meant he was deciding whether to be angry or afraid. He chose angry, because that was more comfortable. This is your wife talking? This woman you've known 5 minutes? She's been looking at the numbers, Owen said. She's right. You're going to take her word over mine?
We've known each other 30 years. Then you should have treated him better,
Moira said. The silence held for a moment. Then Ray pulled his cash box from under the counter and made his calculation, slower than he needed to, hands not quite steady. He counted out the bills and pushed them across to Moira without looking at her. We'll be changing suppliers, she said. They walked out into the gray afternoon.
Owen didn't say anything until they were back in the truck, and then what he said was, "You didn't have to do that. The talking. I know you wanted to. Little bit."
He almost smiled. It was a small one, barely there, but she caught it. 2 weeks into that arrangement, the other shoe dropped. She'd half expected it. People running don't usually outrun everything, and she had never been under the illusion that she'd truly disappeared. She'd just bought time. The man came on a Wednesday. She was hanging laundry on the back line when she heard the unfamiliar truck in the yard, and something in the way the engine idled, like whoever was driving wasn't in a hurry, like they'd arrived and knew it, made her hands go still on the sheet she was holding. She came around the side of the house and saw him before he saw her. Leonard Fenn, her brother-in-law. He was shorter than she remembered, which happened sometimes with people you'd been afraid of. The memory inflated them.
He was talking to Owen in the yard, smiling the way he smiled when he wanted something from someone. Head tilted slightly, both hands in his jacket pockets.
She'd been married to Leonard's brother for 6 years. After Daniel died, accident, the inquest said, and she had never argued with that because she had not been in the room. Leonard had decided the assets of the marriage were also his concern. She had disagreed. She had disagreed most forcefully by leaving.
"There you are,"
Leonard said when he spotted her. His smile didn't change.
That was the thing about Leonard. The smile was structural. It didn't mean anything.
"What do you want?" she said.
"Came to check on you." Bit worried. He looked at Owen. "You the man she's working for?"
"She's not working for me," Owen said. His voice was even. "She's my wife." Moira kept her face still. They had not filed any papers. They had not discussed filing papers. But she understood what he was doing, and she did not contradict him. Leonard's eyes moved between them.
"That's so, filed last week," Owen said. "Judge Morrison's office in town."
It was a specific lie, which made it more convincing than a vague one. Moira had not known he was capable of that. She filed it away. Well, Leonard reset his smile.
"Moira, I just want you to know there are people at home who care what happens to you. Daniel's estate is still unsettled."
"There are things that need your signature. Send them through a solicitor," she said.
"That's what they're for. Family doesn't need solicitors. We do."
Leonard looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Owen with the look men use when they're deciding whether another man is a real obstacle or just scenery. Owen looked back at him without expression, which was, Moira had come to understand how he looked when he had made a decision.
"I'll be in town a few days,"
Leonard said.
"Case you change your mind."
He got back in his truck. They watched him leave. Owen turned to her.
"How bad is it?"
"Not a question. An assessment." She told him that night, at the kitchen table, with the lamp on low and coffee going cold between them. The whole of it. Daniel Fenn, who had been charming when she married him at 24 and less charming progressively after.
The business they'd run together.
A transport company, 3 trucks, decent contracts, that she had kept running largely through her own effort while Daniel handled the face of it. When he died, Leonard had shown up within the week with paperwork she had never seen before, claiming Daniel owed him money, claiming shares in the company, claiming things that required her signature to become legal and that she had read carefully enough to understand were not what they claimed to be. She had stopped signing. Leonard had gotten less polite about it.
She had left. "He can't force your signature," Owen said. "No. But he can make my life difficult until I give up and sign something to make him go away." "How?" She wrapped her hands around the cold cup. "He knows people, knows how to call in favors. He could make noise about the company, tie it up in court,
Make it cost more to fight him than the thing is worth." She paused.
He's done it before, to other people." Owen was quiet for a moment. "You should make the marriage real."
She looked at him.
"Not for any reason except legal protection," he said. "Once you're legally married to someone else, the estate question changes. Leonard's leverage gets smaller. That's a significant thing to do to protect a legal position." "Maybe," he said, "but you're already here. Already doing the work. Already." He stopped, started again. "I'm not asking for anything more than what we've already agreed. Just the paperwork."
She thought about it for 3 days. She watched him work, the quiet way he moved through his own land, the patience he had with the animals, the way he'd rebuilt the barn roof 2 winters ago, and done it right the first time because he couldn't afford to do it twice. She thought about the lock he'd put on the bedroom door before she arrived, and the way he'd said "we" without thinking about it when she'd found Ray's fraud. She said yes on a Saturday morning, over breakfast, without making it dramatic. He nodded. "I'll call the registrar's office Monday." They were married by the end of the following week. 2 witnesses from town, a ceremony that took 15 minutes, a ring Owen had bought at the jeweler's on Main Street that morning. Plain silver, simple, practical. On the drive home she held her hand differently in her lap, getting used to the weight of it. Leonard came back the day after he found out. She didn't know how he found out. Small towns don't require much of an information network, but he arrived at midday looking less managed than the first time. The structural smile was still there, but it was working harder. Owen was in the yard. Moira came to stand beside him. "This is fast," Leonard said. "Not particularly," Owen said.
"We've been together a while. She married you to get away from the estate."
"She married me because she wanted to," Owen said. "What she does or doesn't sign regarding her late husband's company is her decision."
"You've got no standing here." Leonard's eyes moved to Moira. "You really going to throw everything away? Daniel built that company. It should stay in the family." "I am family," she said. "His wife. And I'm telling you to go through a solicitor like I already told you. If your claim is legitimate, a solicitor will sort it out. If it's not—"
She paused. "Then we'll see you in court." Leonard looked at her for a long time. Something behind his eyes shifted, not softening exactly, but recalculating. He was a man who looked for the path of least resistance, and she had just made this path look like a lot of effort.
"You're making a mistake," he said.
"I've made bigger ones," she said. "This isn't one of them."
He left. Owen didn't move until the truck was out of sight, and then he let out a slow breath.
"He'll be back," Moira said. "Probably.
He won't just stop."
"I know." He turned to look at her. "Neither will we." She didn't have a response for that. She thought about it the rest of the afternoon. What followed was a strange, quiet kind of life that she hadn't expected to be as good as it was. Moira took over the ranch's account completely and found within the first month that the operation wasn't as close to failing as Owen thought. It was close, but not falling. With the fuel savings, renegotiated feed contracts, and a grazing lease she found in the county records that he hadn't known he was entitled to, she built them a small margin. Not comfort, just room. Owen watched her work the way you watch someone do something well, not hovering, just noticing. He asked questions when he had them and didn't when he didn't, which was the right ratio. He taught her things too. How to read the cattle, how to know from the way the horses moved in the morning whether the weather was turning, how to replace a pump seal without calling anyone. She was a quick learner. He said so once, plainly, without making it a compliment, which was how she preferred praise. They fell into evenings. That was the part she hadn't predicted. The evenings. After dinner, she at the table with her papers, and he in the chair by the window with whatever he was mending or reading, the radio on low. It wasn't lonely. She hadn't been sure, after so long of either Daniel's noise or her own careful solitude, that she knew how to be with someone without it being either performance or endurance. But this wasn't either of those things. It was just company. Leonard did come back, as she'd predicted. Not in person this time. Through a letter from a law firm in Calgary, claiming that her first marriage had included a domestic contract that gave Daniel's family interest in any jointly operated business for 5 years after the marriage. She read it 3 times, then drove into town and found the small office of a local lawyer named Patricia Kwan, who was younger than Moira expected and sharper than the office suggested.
Patricia read the letter. Then she read it again. "This is aggressive," Patricia said. "That's a careful way to put it. Is there actually a domestic contract?" "Not that I ever signed. Or saw."
Patricia looked at her over the edge of her glasses. "They're claiming you signed it at the time of the marriage."
"I didn't." "Can you prove you didn't? Can they prove I did?"
Patricia almost smiled.
"That's the question, isn't it?" She set the letter down. "Okay, here's what we do."
It took 6 weeks and 2 sets of filings. Moira drove to Patricia's office twice a week, spent hours going through the paperwork from her first marriage, found the original domestic contract that Leonard's lawyers were claiming, and found, carefully tucked into the last page, a signature line with her name typed below it and no signature above it.
Because she had never signed it. Because she had read it at the time and said she wouldn't, and Daniel had said fine, he'd sort it later,
and apparently the sorting had never happened. Patricia filed that with the court on a Tuesday. Leonard's lawyers went quiet for 10 days. Then they withdrew the claim. Moira read the withdrawal notice at the kitchen table while Owen made tea, and she felt something that was not quite triumph and not quite relief. Something older and more complete, the particular feeling of a weight you've been carrying so long you forgot what it felt like to put it down.
Done?
Owen asked, setting the mug in front of her. Done. He sat down across from her. How do you feel? She thought about it honestly. Like I've been holding my breath for 2 years, and I just remembered I can stop. He nodded. He understood the thing about breathing differently. She'd figured that out about him by now. It wasn't a dramatic turning point. What happened after that? It was quieter than that. More like a season-changing, incremental, and then suddenly obvious. She started sleeping through the night without waking at 3 a.m. to listen for sounds that weren't there. She stopped calculating exits when she entered rooms. She started noticing things she'd been too watchful to notice before. The way the light came through the kitchen window in the mornings, yellow and long, the particular silence of the foothills before snow. The way Owen laughed when something genuinely surprised him, which wasn't often but was real when it happened. She noticed she was looking forward to coming back to the house. She noticed that when she drove into town for supplies, she was already thinking about what she'd tell him when she got home. She noticed, one evening in November, that she was happy, not performing it, not measuring it, just in it. She didn't say anything about that for a while. It seemed like the kind of thing that could be damaged by being said too early. But one evening, late in the autumn, she was sitting at the table going through a grazing rotation plan she'd drawn up, and Owen came in from outside and looked at what she was doing and said, simply, "You're good at," she said. Then she looked up at him. "I want to stay." He looked back at her. "Not because of Leonard," she said. "Not because of the legal situation or the house or the ranch. Because I want to be here."
Because this is the first place I've been in years that feels like mine. She paused. Because you're here. Owen sat down across from her. He didn't rush to speak, which she'd come to understand was not hesitation but consideration. He said what he meant, and he took the time to mean it. "I want you to stay," he said. "I think I've been wanting that since about the third day you were here and you told me I was going to lose the ranch if I kept guessing at the books." That was blunt. I needed blunt.
A pause. "I've needed a lot of things I didn't know how to ask for."
She reached across the table and put her hand over his.
He turned his hand and held hers back, steady and without ceremony. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. There was no single moment she could point to later and say,
"That was when everything changed."
It had changed slowly, the way most real things do, through mornings and work and difficult conversations and the accumulation of ordinary trust. But it had changed, completely and without reservation, and when she went to bed that night she felt, for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. A letter came from her sister in March. Clara had always been the quieter one. She'd stayed in Red Deer, had a job at the hospital, had watched Moira's first marriage from a careful distance, and never said much about what she'd seen. The letter was 3 pages handwritten, and the first page was mostly news. The second page was an apology.
"I knew it wasn't right before you did," Clara wrote.
Or maybe I knew at the same time and said nothing, which is worse.
"I've been thinking about that. I'm sorry I wasn't more help when you needed it most." The third page ended. "If you're happy where you are, I'm glad. I'd like to hear about it if you want to tell me." Moira wrote back that same day. 4 pages. She described the ranch, the work, the foothills, and the light. She described Patricia Kwan and the domestic contract that Leonard had tried to weaponize. She described Owen in the way you describe a person when you've run out of distance from them. Not their appearance or their history, but the particular quality of their presence, the specific way they make a difficult thing feel possible. She wrote, "I didn't plan any of this. I planned to disappear and figure out the rest later. I didn't plan to stay."
But I think that's the point. The things worth keeping are usually the ones you find by accident when you were looking for something else. Clara came to visit in May. She was quieter in person than her letters, the way some people are, and she watched Owen with the careful attention of someone deciding whether to trust. By the second day, she'd stopped watching and started just talking to him, which was how Moira knew she'd passed whatever test her sister had been running. On the last night of the visit, after Owen had gone to bed, the 2 sisters sat on the porch with tea going cold and the stars coming out over the foothills, and Clara said,
"He's good. I know. Are you happy?"
Moira looked out at the land, the dark shapes of the cottonwoods along the fence line, the lights of the barn where one of the horses had been restless all week, the particular immense quiet of the prairie at night, which had stopped frightening her sometime around October and had become, without her quite deciding it would, the sound of home.
"Yeah,"
she said.
"I am."
Clara nodded and didn't say anything else, and that was enough. The ranch did well that year. Not rich well, but solid well, the kind of financial ground that means you can plan more than one season ahead. Moira expanded the bookkeeping she'd started for Owen into a small business, managing accounts for 4 neighboring operations. The work suited her. She was good with numbers in the way some people are good with languages. Instinctively, without having to think too hard about the logic, which meant she could think about the thing behind the numbers, which was always really about what someone was trying to build and whether the ground beneath it was sound. Owen said once that watching her look at a set of books was like watching a vet look at an animal. She could see things that weren't visible to anyone else until she pointed at them. She'd taken that as one of the best things anyone had ever said to her. In the fall, Leonard sent one more letter. Not through lawyers this time, just his own handwriting, 2 pages, less aggressive than she'd expected. He wrote that the family had sold the transport company to an outside buyer, and that the proceeds had been divided according to Daniel's actual will, which had named Moira as primary beneficiary. He wrote that his lawyer had advised him, apparently, that he had misunderstood his position. He did not apologize in any explicit way, but the tone of the letter was a kind of deflation, the sound of a man whose certainty had quietly run out. She read it twice. Then she put it in the drawer with her other important papers and went back to what she'd been doing. Owen asked about it that evening. "Done," she said again. The same word as before. It felt right to use it twice. He nodded. He'd learned by then not to make things bigger than they needed to be, which was one of the many things she valued about him. That winter was long and cold in the particular Alberta way, the kind of cold that gets into wood and stays, and they spent a lot of it inside. She learned to bake properly, which she'd never had time or peace to do before. He taught her to play cribbage badly and then beat her every time, because she was competitive about things she'd just learned, and he found that funny. They talked more than she'd expected 2 quiet people to talk, which meant they had more to say to each other than she'd known, which meant something. By spring, she understood that she had built something. Not planned it, not designed it. Built it the way you build something without a blueprint, working with what you have, learning the material as you go, making adjustments. The ranch was better. She was better. Owen was. She thought he was better too, though he would not have said so, being Owen. The first morning of April, she stood at the kitchen window with her coffee and watched him come up from the barn. He moved the same way he always had, steady and unhurried, hat pulled low. He looked up and saw her through the glass and raised his hand in the small half-wave that was their version of good morning when they were too far to speak. She raised hers back. It wasn't a dramatic life. It wasn't the life she'd have written for herself at 24, full of a different kind of hope and a complete lack of knowledge about how people actually disappoint you. It was harder and quieter and more real than anything she'd imagined then. It was hers. Completely and without apology, it was hers. And that, she had come to understand, was not the consolation prize. That was the whole point.